travel a bit because of the committees and the task forces that I serve on for the Anglican Church in North America. I was most recently in Phoenix, and I get to go to Denver in May. And while I enjoy seeing new places and getting to see parts of the country I've never been, I don't particularly enjoy getting there, the travel part, especially flying. It lost its romance for me a long time ago. There is absolutely nothing glamorous about being herded from one overcrowded plane to the next while you're following a really tight time schedule. And I've noticed that flying doesn't exactly bring out the best in people. And I'm one of those people. I've seen videos, though, where people have gotten stuck on a plane, when you're on the tarmac waiting and waiting and waiting. And they've made the best of it by having sing-alongs. The most recent one I saw was the cast of the musical The Lion King singing Circle of Life. Now, I would have loved that. I mean, really, such a hopeful song to kind of help you lift up your spirits. That would be fun. Well, today's song is one of those songs. It's a traveling song. It's one of the Songs of Ascent, which is the name given to Psalms 120 through 134 in the Bible. And these were the songs that the Jews sung as they made their annual pilgrimages to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was built on a hill, and it was the highest city in the whole region, so anytime you went to Jerusalem, you were ascending. Thus the name Songs of Ascent. And Jewish men were required to travel 3 times a year to Jerusalem for the annual festivals, the Passover and Pentecost and the Festival of Tabernacles. They had to go and worship and offer sacrifices at the temple. But for these travelers, they weren't just merely passing the time while they got from point A to point B. They were pilgrims, and they saw themselves on a journey. And not just on a journey to Jerusalem, but on a journey through life. The song that they sung reminded them of God's faithfulness and of God's promises to His people. Today's psalm is one of those songs of ascent. So let's look at it together. It's in your bulletin. Psalm 126. Verses 1 and 2. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. And what the psalmist is talking about here is when God's people had been in exile and He brought them back home, back to the promised land. They'd spent 70 long years in captivity in Babylon, cut off from everything, from their homes, from their land, from the temple where they could worship their God. Everything that gave them identity and meaning in life, they were separated from. So they must have felt forsaken and hopeless. But then, the Lord raises up a deliverer for them in one of the most unlikely places imaginable. He raises up a Persian ruler named Cyrus to overthrow the Babylonians and send God's people back home. It must have seemed like a dream, too good to be true. I mean, after all the long decades of being separated, all of a sudden they get to just go back home? Can you imagine? The only thing I can liken it to is how I would have imagined it was for the concentration camp survivors when the U.S. troops rolled in. Can you imagine the joy? I mean, here are soldiers who are caring for them and showing compassion and mercy when all they've ever known has been brutality and torture and being treated as less than human. Even though their bodies may have been too weak to have expressed it, I would imagine their souls and their spirits couldn't have contained the joy they felt. And that's what we see in verse 3. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. It's a declaration of praise and thanksgiving to God for His goodness and His faithfulness to His people. They proclaim His praise because of what He's accomplished for them in the past. And because of how God has dealt with them in the past, they now have confidence to turn to Him in times of need in the present. Look at verse 4. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. Now, at the beginning of the psalm, it says the Lord has restored our fortunes. And Zion is the city of God, Jerusalem. It's another way of talking about God's people. So here they are again. They just celebrated the fact that God has restored their fortunes, and now they're saying to Him again, restore our fortunes. And we don't know what exactly that means, what's prompting this petition that's causing the psalmist to write. But it's so true of just life in general. Because we seem to regularly go through trials and difficulties in life, one after the other. We'll have a season of good things, and then we'll have a hard season, to be followed by another good season, and on and on and on. I've never known anyone who has lived a worry-free life. Either they or somebody they love has suffered from illness or difficulty or some sort of loss. So again and again, we turn to the Lord and we ask for help. And each time we do it with faith and trust that He will act on our behalf, and He will always answer. He'll always hear, and He will always answer. Now, we don't always understand how He answers them. His ways and His timings are very hard to comprehend. But if we've placed our lives in His hands, we know that He's in control. And so we can trust Him with the outcome, no matter what it is. It seems to me, though, that God never moves swiftly. At least not from my limited perspective. There have been times in history when He has responded with thunderous immediacy. You know, like when Elijah called down fire from heaven. Boom, there it was. Or when Jesus calmed the storm, He just spoke a word and the water went calm. But most of the time, as I said, from my limited perspective, God is very slow and very steady in how He acts in our lives. I mean, we may not see grand miracles day after day, but we can be assured that He is at work, not only in our lives, but in the world around us. Now, the last two verses of the psalm are God's response to the psalmist. He says, "Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them." It's God's promise for the future. That even though we experience suffering and hard times and trials in this life, if we press on in our pilgrimage, and if we sow the seeds of hope in our lives and in the lives of people around us, we can expect a harvest of blessing. We can be assured that either in this life or in the next, there will be good things that God has for us. But again, it takes time. But in following Jesus, we're called to be faithful, because He is always faithful. That is an important reminder for us in this day, because we live in an instant society. It seems like most of the innovations of the last few generations have been created to eliminate us having to wait. Things that used to take time and patience now can be achieved very quickly, and it's usually with a minimum of effort. I mean, let me just give you two examples: cooking and laundry. Before the invention of modern appliances, women spent most of their time cooking and doing laundry because it had to be done by hand, piece by piece. But now we can knock them out like that. Either ourselves or pay somebody else to do it and just drive through and pick it up. But there are no shortcuts in following Jesus. There are no shortcuts for the disciple. We can't pay someone to learn for us the lessons that God has for us in this life. The life of a Christian is one of obedience and patience as we journey through one step at a time. Because it's not just about traveling from the cradle to the grave. It's the journey itself that is preparing us for our ultimate destination, which is heaven. We're not just meant to plod through this life making the best of it for however many years we happen to be given. We're called to be pilgrims on a journey of discovery, learning about who God is and about who He's called us to be. And when we encounter the dangers, trials, and snares, as we know we will, we can be assured that God will either rescue us from them, or redeem them for His purposes and His glory. So the psalm speaks about the past, the present, and the future. It teaches us that we can rely on God's faithfulness now and in the future because of how He has dealt with us in the past. And it's a good travel song as we travel through life. It reminds us to be thankful for all the good things that God has done for us. Not to have short memories about that, to remember and look back at all the things God has done for His people and for us. And I think I've been thinking about that a lot as this church is preparing to celebrate its 10th anniversary. Do you realize that in July of 2006, All Saints Church began 10 years ago? And it was the birth from a painful and difficult separation from St. Francis. The people that formed All Saints took a stand for the gospel. And they left a parish home that they loved and had worked very hard for to start all over again in a small meeting room in a hotel. It was both humbling and exciting at the same time. And the reason I know that is because I was a part of the similar thing when Holy Cross was formed out of Advent. We too left behind everything to start all over again because we felt that was what God was calling us to do. And the blessing of it was being able to watch God provide for the needs, one after another. Getting to see Him, what are we going to do about this? And then all of a sudden, there's a solution right there. And then a few years later, God provided the storefront location for All Saints. And again, we got to watch as God transformed 3 empty units into the worship space where we worshiped and grew together as a community for so many years and saw God use us in so many different ways. And now God's provided again. Here we are in this brand new space. And we're full of hope and expectation that He's given us all of this because He's got big plans for us. God's not done with us yet. And it's been a lot of hard work to get to this point. And there's a lot of hard work ahead. But even though we've been sowing with tears and painting with tears and laying floor with tears, you get the picture, there is a harvest of blessing ahead. For us and certainly for those that God is calling. And again, it's just incredible to watch how the Lord provides. We don't get to see that as Americans because we are such an affluent society. We have most of our needs all met. It's when you're in need that God's always there, but all of a sudden you can see it in a way that you couldn't before. And of course, He provides through the faithfulness of His people. He gives us a chance to give back as well as receive. As a church family, we're on a pilgrimage together. We're seeking God's will and we're following Him step by step. And just like the pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem, we need to remind ourselves of God's goodness and faithfulness in the past so that we can continue to turn to Him again and again, both now and in the future. We need to strengthen our faith and have that sense of hope and expectation for what God is doing and will do. It's interesting. The psalm calls us to remember God's faithfulness in the past, but the Old Testament and New Testament lessons today tell us to forget the past. Anybody notice that? Isaiah 43:18 and 19. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. And then in Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14. Forgetting what is behind and straining forward to what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. So what are we supposed to do? Forget or remember? Both. Of course, the answer is both. There are many times that the Bible tells us to remember. The whole church year is formed around remembering God's saving acts for His people. All the feasts from Advent to Pentecost are about remembering what God has done in our midst. And though we remember the past, we don't dwell on it. We don't allow ourselves to get stuck there. We're always moving forward into the future. Remembering the past is important, but it's a mistake to think and expect things will always be as they have always been. God Himself never changes, but He is always changing in the way He works in our lives and the world around us. He's wildly creative. How He's done things before does not dictate how He will do things again. We can't pin Him down to a certain method or formula, although we would like to. We kind of want to do that because it makes us feel like we got a handle on Him, just a little bit of control. But that's our humanness. That's our fallen nature. We want to have that control over something and someone that will never, ever be controlled. God will never fit into our little boxes. And that's an important message for us today as well, because on this journey in this new place that we are, we're being forced to do things in ways we haven't done them before. The very facility dictates that. And just because we can't do it the way we've always done it, doesn't mean God's not in it. In fact, it's probably a pretty good indication that God is in it. That He's not letting us stay stuck, that He's nudging us and pushing us forward. He doesn't want us to get settled because He wants us to remember we're pilgrims on a journey. And we're always moving forward. What was the last thing Jesus said to the disciples before He ascended into heaven? Go. Not stay. Go. And just because we finally have this wonderful church home that we can call our own, doesn't mean that we've arrived. These buildings are just a tool for God's purposes, just as we are instruments in His hand for His purposes. Right now, understandably, we're very inward focused because we're repairing and renovating and making it our own space. But we can't stay there. As soon as we can, we need to lift our heads up and look outward, because that's where the mission is, that's where the goal is, that's where the work is, out beyond these doors. We follow a faithful God, and He's given us everything we need to follow Him and to serve Him. And because we see His hand at work around us, we're people with hope. And hope is such a precious thing. It's far too precious a gift to keep to ourselves. It has to be shared because there's such a tremendous need for it out there in the world. We know that whatever we face in this life, God is here with us. He will either deliver us or redeem us, one or the other. So we have to keep reminding ourselves of that, not only for ourselves, but for those who might come and be amongst us and those we'll meet out in the world around us. Remember, we're on a journey, but we're on it together. And God is with us every step of the way. Let's pray. Lord, we continue to give you thanks and praise for your goodness and faithfulness to us, Lord. In our each individual lives and as a church as a whole, Lord, you have been faithful and true and good, and you have given such good things to us. Lord, help us to be faithful stewards. Help us to remember the call you have on our lives. Give us the grace, Lord, to always see your hand at work around us and to look ahead to see where you're moving us to next. We give you all thanks and praise and honor and glory. In Jesus' name. Amen.